So welcome to the applicant webinar for the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure, or RFSI program. This is the second of two grant opportunities, and this is the equipment-only track. So just a quick overview of the RFSI program. So this is a new one-time program through USDA. The purpose of the RFSI program, which is happening in all 50 states, is to build resilience in the middle of the food supply chain, to expand markets for small farms and food businesses, and to support the development of value-added products and local communities and workers. Middle of the supply chain is a little bit of an odd term, but it really means aggregation, processing, manufacturing, storing, transporting, wholesaling, or distribution. So basically anything from after a product is picked or collected up until it's sold at retail to the consumer. This program really targets local and regional agricultural products. And I'll just note that that means like local and regional ingredients, not just a product that's kind of manufactured in Vermont. And the big exclusion is that meat and poultry per USDA guidelines are excluded from this. So the equipment only grant track, as the name implies, it's for equipment only. There's about $1 million available. The grants will range from $30,000 to $100,000. And there is no match. The one asterisk to that is unless the equipment costs more than what you're asking for. So if the piece of equipment is $125,000 and you're asking for $100,000, you're going to need to show that you have the other $25,000 to be able to, fully purchase the equipment. Timeline is that the RFA is up online now. Applications will open on August 28th, and they will close on October 1st at 1:59. So just to note that that's not right before midnight, that's right before 2. If you go to hit submit at 2 p.m., it will not let it go through. So it's really 1:59. And we strongly encourage folks to not wait until 1:58 to hit submit in case you have any technical issues. We really can't accept late applications. The estimated kind of award notification is February of 2025. As I'll get into, we will go through our internal process, and then we need to submit our recommendations to USDA for their final approval or questions. So that timeline is really contingent on USDA's timeline. It could be earlier or it could be much later. So we're just having that as an estimate. If that stays on track, we're estimating that grant agreements will be signed and you can actually start spending money and start the project in March of 2025. As a default, the project length will be a year. You have the option to, folks could just make sure that they're muted. That would be great.
On your page, notice the line.
Folks are muted. You have the option to extend that to be a 2-year project period. It doesn't impact your competitiveness at all. So it could go until February of 2027. That could be a situation of like maybe you're doing construction for the new building that the equipment's going to be housed in, and it's going to take a year to build it. So you know that you're not going to be able to really buy or install the equipment afterwards. Part of that project length is also understanding the outcomes of that equipment. So the project is not solely just like purchasing the equipment and getting it installed, but it builds in some time to see it in action, if you will, and kind of figure out the outcomes of what that equipment can do. So as I said, the decision process, once we receive all the applications on October 1st, we'll do a quick review, make sure they meet the very basic eligibility of like being in Vermont and being a basic, good fit for the program, not meat or poultry, et cetera. And then we'll have 3 folks review and score the applications. Usually that's at least one agency person and at least one outside subject matter expert. We'll compile all those scores and we'll have a review meeting or more than one if needed. And we'll speak about the scores, but also the discussion and the comments are very important. So we don't just award the top scores. We really look at everyone holistically and understand who's the right fit for this funding opportunity. And we try the best we can to have some equity in different locations around the state, different types of projects, different scales, different products, et cetera. And then, as I said, we'll compile our recommendations into big paperwork bundles and send them to USDA for their final approval. They do have the ability or they retain the right to ask questions or to deny, and we're working really closely with them to make sure that the information we get out to you is in line with what they're looking for. So the grant goals for this equipment-only grant, the primary goals that RFSI has listed out are really the crux of what the application should be about. So we're asking applicants that they have to hit one of the primary goals, which is to increase market access. So getting into a newer, bigger, better, different, more profitable market. To increase production, like increase the number of units moved through this wherever you are on the supply chain. Or to diversify your product offering. So offering a new size, a different flavor, a different type of products. So the project really must hit one of those goals, which are pretty broad, but simply replacing like an old piece of equipment with a new one that's not gonna hit one of these goals is not gonna be a good match for this grant. We also have a list of secondary goals from the RFSI program. These are optional. The full list is in the RFA, and these are about economic opportunities in communities, new and safe jobs, food safety requirements, climate resilient equipment, or modernization. So again, you have to meet one of the primary goals, and it's a bonus, as is outlined in the scoring, if you can hit one or more of the secondary goals as well. USDA is prioritizing projects that will benefit those who have historically had difficulty accessing capital or markets. And specifically for Vermont, this is limited resource, new and beginning, or veteran farmers or producers. And there is an element in the scoring that offers an ability to for reviewers to score higher if this prioritization is kind of in effect. So eligible applicants are agricultural producers or processors, nonprofits, local government institutions, or for-profit entities. The for-profit does need to meet the small business standards, so it needs to be relatively small. In Vermont, most of the companies do meet that threshold, and there's the exact details in the RFA. If you are a bigger company, we'll have an assertion at some point in your application that you do meet that. So eligible projects, I'll also just note, I know this is a lot of information and a lot of text. I'm just going to try to run through it, and we'll have time for questions. All of this is also in the RFA, and this will be recorded. So thanks for bearing with me through all the details. For eligible projects, the equipment, again, has to have a direct and significant impact on at least one of the three primary goals. The projects need to be based around local or regional agricultural products, which could include raw or processed dairy, produce, grains for human consumption, beverages, vegetarian protein, etc. And again, the ingredients also must be local or regional, and regional here is defined as within 400 miles. So the projects could be around post-harvest handling, processing, manufacturing, storing, transporting, or distributing. So that could look like equipment to meet wholesale standards, like equipment that offers food safety or packaging, labeling, or a quantity that's kind of needed to reach a new market. It could be something like value-added equipment that would significantly increase your production. Or equipment that enables a new product line, like a new package size or a new kind of bottling size or a new variety or flavor of a product. So the eligible expenses, as I've noted, is equipment only. Equipment is noted as one unit is priced at $5,000 or more. A project could include multiple pieces of equipment, but it needs to be a unified project. So if your project is about, local apple pie, and you're getting like regional flour and local apples, and you need equipment to mill the flour, and then you need a cooler to hold the apples, those two pieces of equipment are tied into kind of that one end product or one project. If you were looking for those two pieces of equipment for the apple pies, but you were also a dairy and needed a new bottling line for the dairy, those are two separate product lines, potentially going to different markets. The equipment kind of has different outcomes. Those are really two separate projects that we'd ask you to choose one project or another. The equipment needs to be specialized, not general use. So this could be things like processing or preservation, coolers or freezers, delivery vehicle or refrigerated truck, packaging or labeling equipment, like an RO machine, anything for cooking, baking, juicing, distilling, or fermenting, as long as it's $5,000 or more. General use that's not allowable would be things like a general car for your business that you're using to make sales inquiries, or staff traveling, or like a printer for the office to print invoices. Line items like shipping, installation, and sales tax are eligible, as long as it's included in the equipment quote. So if there's a separate installation cost that can't be covered, like if you have to pay a contractor to do some work to do the installation, that's not covered. But if there's installation, or again, that like shipping and handling or sales tax that's on that one quote, that's all eligible. So ineligible projects and expenses are equipment with minimal or no impact on one of the three primary RFSI goals. So again, for example, if you have a need to replace a piece of equipment because you want the climate smart version that's going to be better for the environment, or if there's a more ergonomically friendly piece of equipment, but it's really not changing any of your throughput or your markets, we're very in favor of both of those things, but that's not in alignment with the goals, so that would not be the best fit. Other ineligible items are projects for meat, poultry, wild-caught seafood, animal feed, cannabis fiber, landscaping, tobacco, dietary supplements, seeds, or hemp-derived CBD, or anything not for human consumption. If you are looking for a piece of equipment that's mixed use, like if you're a food hub and you need a cooler that's going to hold meat and dairy and produce, you're going to need to prorate your request. So if the piece of equipment is $100,000, but it is 10% used for meat products, which are unallowable, then you can only ask for 90% of that total project cost to kind of prorate and exclude the meat portion. Other ineligible things, as I said, are products that are not local or regional, or not made of local or regional ingredients. If there are minor things like salt or vinegar, minor things, definitely reach out about that. If there's something minor, that's fine. If it's getting into a higher percentage of a non-local ingredient, that's probably not going to be the right fit, or not going to be as competitive. This grant can't cover things needed to prepare the space to house the equipment, like plumbing, electric, construction, etc. Staff time or training, solar panels or generators, software like IT systems or tracking software, contingency, so if the price increases, indirect or administrative costs, farm production like a tractor or irrigation system, or retail needs like a display cooler at a farm store, or at a cooler at a food cooperative. Marketing or branding costs, or wastewater needs. So the application process, all the application questions are in the RFA, that request for application that I believe Jenny put in the chat, that has all of these details, and we tried to be really transparent about what the application questions and the scoring is going to be. So the application questions are around description and goal alignment, timeline, outcomes, impact, and beneficiaries. And then also questions about, like, is this the right size and timing for your business and for the market needs? And so really being able to answer about how this is a good fit holistically, that you have the ingredient source, you have markets that want your product, or a distributor that needs to distribute is on board for the increase in production or the new flavor that you're putting out to market. The budget's pretty simple. It's just the equipment costs, and you need a quote for that. Again, there's no match required, but if the equipment is more than what you're asking for in the grant, you do need to show how you're going to pay for that. Attachments. So the RFA speaks about letters of commitment and support. These are really helpful for reviewers to, again, kind of understand that holistic picture of, do you have, every business needs different partners and players to make their operations work, and letters are really a great way to show, again, maybe if you are a tomato, pasta sauce processor, if you're going to be getting equipment to really increase your operations, do you have a tomato supplier that has all the tomatoes that you need, or do you have interest from markets to get the increased production or the different flavor of what you're going to be distributing, or is the distributor on board to distribute your product? As I said, you need an equipment quote. It must match exactly what's in your budget, and it must be relatively recent. Within the last few months would be great. There's also a few other attachments that are needed that are outlined in the RFA. Hey. There's evidence of critical infrastructure that really just shows that the space and kind of the infrastructure that you need is available. There is a NEPA questionnaire. NEPA is an environmental review, so there's a check if there is any negative environmental impact. And then there's an optional space to upload things like a business plan or a strategic plan or financials or a product overview, kind of anything else that would be helpful for reviewers to know your business or the product. And then you'll need to submit via Web Grants, which is our online grants management portal, by the deadline. If you have not used Web Grants before, you'll need to register. The link for that is in the RFA. It takes a few business days, so please don't wait until very close to the deadline to register. It's a little bit wonky. We acknowledge Web Grants is kind of an older platform, so if it's your first time, definitely build in some extra time to get to know the platform. We're available to answer questions. If you're having tech issues, just please give us as much notice as possible so we can help. Great. Just have a few more slides and we'll open it up into questions. So the scoring, again, the full description is in the RFA. We try to be really transparent about exactly what the reviewers are going to be scoring. There is elements of the primary goal alignment, secondary goal alignment, demonstrated need, expected outcomes and scale, community impact, project beneficiaries, business viability and financial management, budget, and those letters of support and commitment. Reviewers will also give a holistic score from 1 to 5, and then a space for narrative about strengths, weaknesses, and other comments. And then just a few last details. The payment provisions are that once we get the official green light from USDA, we'll work with you to draft and sign the grant agreement, which is the official document kind of outlining what the project is all about, what the outcomes are. And once that is signed, there's a little bit of paperwork that goes with that. You'll be able to submit a claim for 70% of the total grant award. You don't need to have spent any money to do that, so you can get that 70% before you purchase the equipment. Upon approval of the midway report, which is just a few months later in the summer of 2025, You can submit a second claim for 20% of the total grant award. And then upon the final report, which is after the project and the grant is done, which is about March of 2026, you can claim up to the final 10%. So it's just important to note that if you are buying a piece of equipment, that's expensive right after the grant agreement is signed, you will need to front up to 30% of that cost, and you won't get that last 10% until after the grant is done, which is a year later. Obviously, if your project is 2 years, that gets drawn out a little bit more in the middle. Reporting will ask for reports on outcomes, successes, challenges, and the proof of the purchase. If anything has changed throughout the course of the grant. And then disposition is another important thing to flag, that we'll need you to track the depreciation of the equipment, and we can help you figure that out. But basically, if you sell the equipment even after the grant is over, so even in 5 years, if you sell it before it depreciates below $5,000, you would need to pay some of that money back. So that's just to have it be that so a business couldn't, buy a massive piece of equipment and sell it a few years later and pocket the money. We'll again work with you to figure that out, but it is an important piece to remember that you'll need to track that and be responsible for reaching out to us. If you do need to sell it for some reason, we'll need to do some math to figure out what you would need to pay back ultimately to USDA. Great. That's our overview. Again, I acknowledge that's a lot of information. I know Jenny's watching the chat. We will send this recording out and happy to take questions. Jenny, do you want to start with anything in the chat?
Yep, there's one question in the chat. It says, does the prorating only apply to meat and poultry, or also to products that aren't the main focus of the grant? For example, existing products that would be stored as well as the new product.
So the prorating is for anything that's an ineligible item, because the grant funds can't be used to fund anything that's ineligible. So that would be flowers, cannabis, grains not for human consumption, etc. So that proration would need to apply to everything that's ineligible.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm not able to type into the chat for some reason. For how many years is the reporting, if one were to get the word?
So the reporting is through the life of the grant. So it's just the year typically. The final report will include kind of all the outcomes and the successes and challenges and your final, budget information. The depreciation is tracking if you do sell the equipment and it's valued at more than $5,000. That's for the life of the equipment that you have.
But you don't have to report on outcomes 1 year after the end of the grant.
No.
And then I had another question about meat. My company makes products that contain local meat and products that do not contain local meat, but it's not So like does any product that contains poultry or beef, is that basically excluded?
So
if it also contains local potatoes and local corn, etc.
Yeah, so it might be helpful to chat offline just to get into the weeds, because this is a question that has come up before that's can be a little wonky. There's kind of two parts of it. If you have a meat and a vegetarian, option of whatever it is, the stew or whatever that you're making, there's kind of an option to then prorate of removing the meat-based product. So if you do 50-50, you could ask for 50% of the equipment. The second part is that it kind of depends how much the meat is like the main ingredient or kind
The
of the main.
proportion of meat, you mean, in the product?
Yeah. Like if it's a chicken pot pie where it's like a lot of chicken and like a few potatoes, that's a little different than, I don't know, something that has kind of less percentage. But I will say that it is, it will be likely a less competitive application the more there is a meat centric food product kind of at play. It just kind of decreases the connectedness of the grant goals if there is kind of a large portion of the product or the business or the equipment use that's going to be meat.
All right, so maybe I can get with you offline.
Yeah, that would
Talk
be
about the
great.
specifics. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
Sorry, I did not have a clear answer, Lori. I'll put my info in the chat as well. Great. Jenny, were there any other questions in the chat first?
There are some questions in the chat. Let me read them. So we've got, if you needed a piece of an equipment and there's an energy efficient version that is twice the price, do you submit 2 separate applications or put the options in one application?
So we would recommend that you choose what's the right thing for your business and submit the application for whichever piece of equipment is kind of the right fit. If the piece of equipment is equal in all ways to your business, but there's just a benefit of the climate smart piece, there is the secondary goals that's optional of the climate smart. Again, this might be a conversation offline just because it kind of depends on the nuance. But I would really encourage you to put forth an application of this piece of equipment is the best fit for our business and not trying to kind of write to the grant too much. We don't distinguish between the size of the application. So we won't say no to a grant application that's strong, that's 99,000 solely in favor of 2 $50,000 awards. It's all about the strength of the application as a whole, and we're able to, we're okay either giving more smaller awards or fewer larger awards. It really depends on kind of how strong of an argument and alignment you're making in the application. But happy to also speak offline about the exact circumstance there.
Okay, next we have, if you need 2 pieces of equipment, do you submit 1 application or 2?
So just 1 application. Again, if those 2 pieces of equipment are related, so for that apple pie example, if you need a cooler for the apples and then some equipment for the grain and then an oven, those are all related to the same project and end product that you can then report out on. I sold this many apple pies to this many markets. If they're totally separate pieces of equipment, so the apple pie pieces and then a milk bottling project, it would not make sense to have both of those pieces of equipment in the same application, and we would ask you to only submit 1 application. So to choose which one is most in alignment or most in need.
Okay. Next one is, what if 100% of the ingredients of a product cannot be obtained regionally? For instance, we have trouble sourcing all of our flour from Vermont growers, but use as much as we can obtain.
Yeah. So Thomas, that again could be a good question for us to take offline and kind of figure out the exact situation. The parameters of USDA really are all about local and regional ingredients. And again, regional is within 400 miles. So would love to hear a little bit more about if you can source that within 400 miles. And if not, kind of what percentages are we talking about? And we might elevate that question to USDA just to get their take on it.
Okay, next we have regarding dispensation. If the business is sold but continues to operate as the same kind of business, does the grant do grant funds need to be recovered?
That's a great question. I can take that up the chain. I believe that if it is a separate business that you're selling it to, that the disposition would still apply, even if it's being used for the same reason. But if it's a totally different business, then that would apply. If the business was like merging with another business and kind of retaining some of itself, but merging into a different, or a cooperative or something, that might be a different situation. So again, maybe reach out if you have a sense that something might be coming down the pike for your business in the next few years.
Okay, next we have, is any farm production eligible?
So no farm production is eligible. It is all post-harvest handling. So once you gather the crops from the field and kind of bring it into the wash pack or whatever you're doing with it, at that point it becomes the middle of the supply chain, because you're kind of packing or washing or storing it. That the true production of growing the product or collecting the sap is not eligible for this.
Okay, let's pause on the chat questions because there's some folks with their hands up that I want to make sure we get to.
Great, thank you, Jenny. Let's see, Janet, go ahead. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Oh,
can.
sorry. And I can't get in the chat and I couldn't unmute myself. I'm so sorry.
Sorry, sometimes Teams is really hard. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I just have a clarification. So I did see something in there about an RO. So this is completely open for maple production?
Yes, so
Okay.
they are considering sap as like a production. So if the collecting of the sap is not eligible, but turning that into the value add of the maple syrup is.
Okay, awesome. And is there going to be, I mean, I did review quickly the RFA, but is there a minimum, I don't remember seeing this, a minimum time that the business has to have been in operation, or are there projections or a business plan required for this if it's a newer business?
So there's not business plan projections required. We would really ask for you, if you're a newer business, to just kind of make the argument very clearly that all of what you're proposing makes sense. I will just note that I will need to triple check the RFA to see if there's any considerations from USDA about like a startup. But I also encourage you to reach out directly with kind of exactly what your situation is, of if you're in operations yet or just for a little bit, that might make a difference.
Yeah, it's not my operation. I'm the grant writer. So I mean, he's been doing it, but he sort of semi-retired and changed it from sort of, recreational, passive income into like a regular business. So it's not a brand new startup or anything. It's just getting more attention, and he wants to grow that a little bit. So, but I can send you that question. Thank you so much.
That sounds great. Yeah, thank you. And I'll just note, apologies that we don't always have the perfect answers. It's a little bit of some Vermont terms and conditions, and also USDA, and this is a new program with them. So we will work really hard to answer questions if we don't have it today. Let's go to Cherry Sullivan. We'll come back to the chat. I see questions in there.
Hi. I was curious so we are a nonprofit, which I see is eligible, but we actually don't sell food. We give it out. We distribute it for free. So are we eligible if we're not actually selling food? So
the whole kind of goals of RFSI is market development, and kind of with the intention of selling the product and good wages to workers. So I don't believe that it would be a competitive application.
Okay. All right.
Great. Let's go to Maria.
Hi. So I was wondering if when you submit the quote for the equipment, if then later down the line, if you do receive funding, if that equipment winds up being more than what was originally quoted for, is there some leeway with that?
Yeah, so unfortunately there's not, and this is a USDA stipulation. So the budget needs to match the equipment quote that you have on hand at the time of the application, which I totally understand that prices change dramatically in a short amount of time. It would be up to the grantee to cover the difference of what that cost would be. And if there's a question of not moving forward with the grant because the cost has increased so much, that would be a conversation kind of in the spring when the grant agreement is being drafted. Great. Trisha?
Okay. Hi. Nope.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Oh, good. So a quick question for a maple producer who uses glass bottles. Would a bottle washing equipment, would that be eligible?
So it would be eligible. Again, it's all if it meets one of the 3 primary goals. So if that is able to have an increase on your production or a different product line or access to a market, if it is solely for I'll just kind of try to make something up for worker satisfaction or ergonomics or a tiny increase in production, like you're saving a little bit of time, that would probably not be the right fit or a competitive application.
Okay, thank you. And for a dairy farm, ice cream making equipment?
Yes. Yeah. If the milk is local or regional. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
And again, that would be a moment of, if you're using local ingredients for the flavors of the ice cream, that's great. If there are some ingredients like, almonds or sea salt or, chocolate that's not local, again, that's a little bit of a question of just like to what how much, like percentage wise. If it's just a tiny bit of chocolate chips that aren't local, that's really different than filling it with ingredients that are not local or regional. So definitely reach out if you have questions about that, and just really encourage everyone to be as clear as possible in their application, especially about some of those trickier things.
All right, should we go back to the chat?
Yeah, go ahead, Jenny.
Okay. Will you award less than the funds requested?
So we will aim to fully fund the projects just because we know it's really helpful to fund what folks ask for. That being said, we might award less than the funds requested if there's some reason that kind of makes sense, or like if we get to the last grant that we are able to fund and we don't have enough money to fund the whole project. But we will try to either fund or not fund fully all the projects.
Will you be less eligible if you have already received funds for other equipment in your production plan?
So I believe that this is outlined in the RFA. You might be less competitive if you've received a lot of other funding from the state. We also acknowledge that a lot of, projects or businesses across the state, need and appreciate a lot of grant funding, especially for bigger projects. So it just depends a little bit of kind of what's the size and scale of your business, how many grants you've received at what scale. There's not a cut and dry kind of line of if you've received one in the past year, you're not eligible. But definitely reach out if you have questions about that. We can kind of work it there a little bit more.
Does the value-added product need to be cooked or transformed to a certain level in order to qualify, such as an herbal mixture?
I don't believe so. Amy, might be helpful to connect just about about the specific situation, just so I'm understanding it. You know, raw product is eligible as well, and kind of I think like a minimally processed, if you will, that's maybe not like a true value add, is also eligible. Again, as long as it's, you know, food for human consumption.
Okay. Next question is SAP storage eligible?
I would need to triple check before I give you an answer, Jennifer. If you're able to, again, send me an email with that question, that would be great. Just want to make sure I'm giving you the right information. I think it could be.
Okay, next one is about disposition, I guess. Again, I'm thinking of a sale to a child to continue the farm, or possibly another younger farmer who wants to take over the operations. As you can guess, I am getting older and passionate that the value-added organic dairy business continues into the future. We have established markets and solid customer retention. So this is related to the original disposition question, transferring businesses.
Yeah, so it's a great question. Because my sense in that is that the business would still stay intact. It's just selling to a different owner. Again, Rich, if you can email me that question, let me just run it up to USDA to make sure that I'm giving you the accurate information. My sense is that there could be an easier kind of workaround there because it's still staying with the business. It's not like the business is selling it and retaining the profits.
Okay, next question is, how do you get a quote for equipment that somebody might want to buy on like a secondhand market like Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace?
Lindsay, I believe that USDA accepts like a catalog price kind of in lieu of a quote. So I wonder about, you know, just simply a screenshot of that would be sufficient. I think that there's an asterisk that it needs to like be in working order, like somehow ensuring it's like a reputable product. So again, Lindsay, sorry to ask you all to do this extra work. If you could just email me with that question, I'll again just run it by USDA to make sure that I'm giving you the right information.
Okay. Next is, if you complete the project in 6 months, can you file a final report and get the last 10% at that time rather than waiting the full year?
Yeah, great question. So we really try to kind of wait closer to the year mark. I think within like 3 months early would be great. As I mentioned at the beginning, the project is really not solely about getting the equipment purchased and installed, but it's about having time to track the outcomes and to really see the benefit of having the equipment, of what the impact is on your product or your market. So it also depends on if you have kind of substantial outcomes or what the timeline is. So definitely, I would say like 3 months early would be acceptable. If you get into earlier than that, it becomes a little problematic for a few different reasons. But if you want to reach out and speak about your exact situation, would be happy to. I know that it is a financial burden and cash flow issue to wait.
That's the end of the chat questions for now. Do any folks want to unmute themselves and ask a question?
This is Ed here. I have actually a few questions, but I think they're all pretty quick. Does meeting more than one primary or meeting more than one secondary goal add to the points that we would get in when it's scored?
Yeah, so the scoring is, sorry, I'm just pulling it up as you're speaking. Um, um, yes, I would say it would, as long as it, if it makes sense and it's meeting more than one of either of those two goals, it is just a bit of a stronger argument that it really is meeting the intentions of RFSI.
The next question I have is the products are sourced in Vermont versus regional make a difference in the scoring?
It does not, as it's laid out.
Okay.
It's either local or regional.
Okay. And then this wasn't my primary reason for, wouldn't be my primary reason for applying, but would be the setup of a retail store for selling our value-added products count?
So retail does not count at all. So anything that's consumer facing, even if it's kind of storage,
Yep.
wouldn't count.
Okay. I think that was all I had.
Great. Perfect. Any questions from anyone else? Great. I appreciate that was a little bit rapid fire and that many of my answers were not maybe as clear as helpful. So really appreciate the patience. Again, please reach out to me with any questions, either that were asked today that I indicated for you to email me or otherwise. Well, again,
Oh, we got one more question.
Go ahead.
Hi, Julia. I have a question for you about assistance with applying for this grant.
Yes.
So for the last grant, as you know, there was like Tad, for example, who was able to help. I was told that there wasn't as much assistance around that this time. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you so much for noting that. So there is not the same support from TAD as was offered with the infrastructure award earlier this summer. However, the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board has their READY program, Rural Economic Development Initiative, that can offer some grant writing or grant preparation assistance. And we'll put this information in the chat as well. They likely have between like 5 and 10 hours available per applicant, depending on how much requests they get. The only asterisk is that business needs to be based in a community of less than 5,000 people. And needs to be an eligible client, like a farm or food and forest business based in Vermont. I will put Mariah's contact information to the chat. I would get in touch with her ASAP just to kind of hear more, make sure you're eligible, and kind of get in the queue and figure out what support is helpful from her. Great, thanks, Jenny. Ella, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself.
I had a question about, in the application, I saw specialty crops, and we are a nursery that sells vegetable starts and fruit trees, bushes, and stuff. So we're looking to expand where we're selling them to and looking for a transportation vehicle to do that. And I just want to make sure that that's eligible.
So this is really for food for human consumption. So starts, even though they turn into food for humans, would not be eligible. Any other questions? Great. So again, appreciate the rapid fire here. Please be in touch with any questions. Put my email in the chat as well as the RFA, and Jenny put the READY program, which is the grant writing assistance. For the infrastructure award, we also did an FAQ. So really happy to put that out there and or clarify anything in the RFA that is confusing. So if there's any way we can make this process easier, please reach out. We're happy to kind of update with as much information as possible. I will note that I'm on vacation next week. I'm going to be offline. So if you have questions, please reach out ASAP, and then I'll have my supervisor and team as a contact next week if there are questions. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Jenny. And we will notify you when the recording is up online. And thanks again.